Good morning. My name is Christie and my project is entitled Salvia Divinorum, Patterns of Use. Salvia Divinorum may be the most potent, naturally occurring hallucinogen among all hallucinogens, according to many medical experts. Dried salvia leaves can be chewed or made into a tea, but dried leaves and extracts are most commonly smoked. Smoking salvia can produce powerful hallucinogenic effects, which do not last as long as other commonly used hallucinogens. When smoked, the experience usually occurs within 30 seconds and peaks for about 5 to 6 minutes. The effects generally last from 15 to 30 minutes and typically end within an hour of consumption. Salvia is non-toxic. There are no deaths from overdose reported, and there is no treatment for using salvia. Many states have already passed legislation on salvia, including Florida, New York, and Delaware. In these states, the possession, sale, and distribution of salvia are felony offenses. Few states, such as California and Maine, have taken other directions by limiting the sale of salvia to those aged 18 and older. This legislation is due to a number of factors, including the negative media coverage and portrayal of the drug and the drug user. These portrayals can be found on YouTube.com, CNN, NPR, Dr. Phil, and many others, also becoming the key defense in legislative efforts to regulate the drug. The U.S. Congress has not passed any bill federally banning salvia in the U.S. Currently, salvia is legal in Massachusetts, and you may purchase it on the internet and in smoke shops. Currently, there is limited research on salvia and the people who use this drug. Without this substantial research, the most effective way to address salvia use is unknown. Therefore, proposed and implemented legislations on the drug may be ineffective and harmful. Without understanding the individual, the social, and situational factors associated with salvia use, it is likely that this policy will fail the users. Because knowledge on the users and use patterns of salvia is limited, we continue to try and impose punitive sanctions on the possession and sale of this drug. My study's purposes are to understand the factors that shape the patterns of salvia use, to add to a limited research and literature pool on patterns of use, and to use data to propose an effective drug policy. In sum, my study answers 3 overall research questions. What factors influence the decision to use salvia? What factors influence the settings where salvia is used? And how can those factors associated with salvia assist in development of more accurate theories and effective criminal justice policies? This research uses qualitative methods, mainly in-depth interviews with 22 adult users, all of whom have used salvia at least once. To gather participants, 2 sampling methods were used. Flyers were distributed around Massachusetts, mainly in the Boston and Cambridge area. The flyer conveys information about the study, including the incentive, the age and use requirement, and the study's interest in salvia use experiences. It also includes an email address, which was created for specific use of the study to maintain participant confidentiality and accessibility. The snowball sampling method was also employed with hopes of attracting additional participants. Flyer hanging thus far has been more successful. For the sample, you can refer to Table 1 for the characteristics. These individuals are either former or current users of salvia. The average age is 20.7 years with a range of 18 to 27 years. They're most identify as white or Caucasian, heterosexual males attending college. The majority of the sample's income includes various part-time occupations, while others' income is related to their studies in school. 5 participants have no income, and 3 participants have full-time professions. Most of the sample has never been arrested for a drug-related offense. Each participant was given an informed consent prior to the interview, describing the purpose of the study, the extent of his or her participation, confidentiality information, permission for digital recording, and that he or she will receive a $20 Best Buy gift card for their participation. The participants are allowed to choose a pseudonym, which is how I refer to them throughout the study. This way, the participants' confidentiality is maintained. The interviews are semi-structured, with open-ended responses to achieve in-depth interviews from the participants. Most of the questions are based on the participants' experiences and their reasons for using salvia. My data analysis plan is based on grounded theory. I compare one interview to another, seeking to identify similar and different patterns among the experiences of the participants. I also compare the findings on salvia use in my study to other studies on salvia and other studies on hallucinogen use. And finally, using inductive reasoning, I establish common themes and frameworks. Essentially, I discern which theory emerged or if a new theory should be constructed. My findings will show that there are 10 overall patterns of use. I will provide quotes from participants as evidence for a few of these patterns. Usually their onset of salvia use is by friends or acquaintances, which is whom they feel most comfortable using with. A few, however, do use alone for self-meditation and relaxation. Almost all do not wish to use around strangers. Almost all would rather use indoors. None of the participants use the drug on a regular basis. This can be seen by a quote by one of the participants, Eddie. But it's not something that I would do all the time. It's not something that I would ever get hooked to. I wouldn't do it daily. I wouldn't do it probably even weekly ever. And that's what a lot of people that I talk to about it say. Continuing with the overall patterns of use. Smoking is the most preferred method. All are polydrug users, meaning that they engage in illicit and licit drug use, including marijuana, LSD, mushrooms, and prescription drugs. If mixed with another drug, marijuana is usually the drug of choice. Most prefer other drugs over salvia in a given situation. This is demonstrated by one participant's explanation. Marcus: I don't say I'd ever prefer to use salvia over any other drug. It's not particularly fun in a way that, makes me comfortable to use it over anything else. The final overall patterns of use are most participants are unlikely to use salvia again, and most would not search for salvia if it became illegal. This quote by Jeff demonstrates that. Would you change your use of salvia if it was illegal? I don't think it would affect me, no. Unless it were a question of, oh, it's illegal, you can't buy it in the store anymore. Now you have to, call this person and that person. I wouldn't go through that trouble for salvia. My study shows the pharmacological, situational, and individual factors that are critical in understanding why, when, and how these participants use. Most participants like the visual hallucinations best when using salvia. This can be seen in Marlena's quote. I like the crazy visuals, if I'm just gonna be perfectly honest. More factors include a dislike for the loss of will to move around freely and the intensity which surpassed expectations, the creation of the right setting to have the most positive experience, the use of a sitter or at least someone who is there to prevent any adverse effects, a preference for a calm, quiet, peaceful place to use. This place includes low or no lighting and limited unexpected distractions. And finally, the state of mind, which should be relaxed, happy, or positive, and focused on entering the trip. This can be explained by Daisy's quote. You have to kind of want to make sure you don't have anything leaning over your head or anything too intense. But you just have to make sure that you're in a good headspace and a good mood. Clearly, the use of salvia is dependent on the setting, the peers, and the user's personality and taste interests. Influences of pattern of use. All of the factors mentioned previously illuminate Zimberg's well-known book, Drug Set and Setting. Zimberg explains that to understand drug use, we need to focus on these big factors. The drug focuses on the drug's pharmacological properties, including the chemical effect to the body and thoughts. The set, which focuses more on the state of mind and personality of the user. This includes the mood of the user at the time of consumption, as Daisy discusses, and interests such as art, engineering, music, mind expansion, and thrill seeking. And finally, the setting, which relates to what kind of setting the user is in when using the drug. This includes whether the setting is familiar or unfamiliar, whether they use inside or outside, whether they use with friends, acquaintances, or strangers, and whether they have the ideal situation, which means they're in the situation where they feel most comfortable to have the best experience. Drug set and setting together strongly affect if the individual will use salvia in their overall experience. This leads to persistence and desistance, whether they will continue to use or no longer use the drug. If their experience has been positive, if they like the effects, if they are in a good frame of mind, if they are in the ideal setting, they may decide to persist in use. If the opposite is true, they do not like the effects, etc., they may desist from use. So what does these data tell us? Well, every participant expressed their belief that salvia should remain legal, and most believed an age restriction from 16 to 20 would be suitable for current and future users. And I agree. While I realize that an age restriction of 16 is very unlikely, age 18 is reasonable. These users admit to wanting to be responsible about their use. They make great effort to learn the facts about the drug, using both online sources and referring to their friends, since they are the ones they can relate to the most. Since they do not like using in public or around strangers, and usually remain in one room while using, we do not have to worry about them causing a public nuisance. All discuss that they would not and have not used salvia while driving, and as a result, they are much less likely to cause harm to others or even themselves. Most importantly, this drug does not have a high potential of abuse. Among this sample, and among other samples in salvia users, there is low prevalence or incidence of use. This is not a drug that is used by many, and those who do use do not use frequently. This is especially apparent when compared to other drugs used by both my participants and nationally. None of the participants craved the drug or showed addictive use patterns, which is similar to patterns of hallucinogen use more generally, which is very different from other drugs such as alcohol, nicotine, meth, and heroin. Most participants said they would choose to use almost any other drug over salvia, even given its short duration and minimal to no hangover or after effects. Therefore, salvia may not be as much as a concern as other drugs. With this in mind, it is apparent to me that this drug is basically policing itself, which means if someone tries it and doesn't like it, they desist from use and therefore do not get hooked. If they use it and they like it, they aim for the most positive aspects with the least possible negative consequences. And still, they do not use frequently and they do not get hooked. Criminalization may not be necessary if the users and the drug effects police themselves. There are a few limitations to my study. The sample size of this study is relatively small. The ideal size of a study of this nature is 30 to 50 participants. I only had 22. I used purposive sampling, which is to select individuals to be studied based on the knowledge of the sample. Past studies discussed college students as primary users, and so flyers were hung around college campuses. Convenience sampling was also used, which relies on available subjects. By hanging flyers in certain areas and not in others, and waiting for someone to contact me, it is very likely that those salvia users who did respond could be very different from those who didn't. And so this sample may not be representative of all salvia users. Another sampling problem could have resulted from the IRB. The IRB asked that I receive signed permission from each establishment where I hung flyers. Many owners or managers were hesitant to sign, and more so when they learned it was on a drug. Some would not sign because they did not read English, and others would not sign because they did not want to be responsible for flyers hung in a community bulletin board. This caused a decrease in approval from owners, and hence where I hung the flyers, and this could have affected who saw the flyers and therefore who was in my sample. For future studies, I would have hung flyers about the study much earlier. This could have greatly increased the sample size. I would also go for a wider range of area coverage, perhaps across Massachusetts. I also think it is crucial to investigate more closely the effects of criminalization of salvia. If salvia was to become illegal in Massachusetts, it would be fascinating to look at the changes in patterns of use. If it was to remain legal, I would be very interested in doing a comparison study between Massachusetts and a state where it is criminalized. I am also looking forward to publishing my work in an academic journal and presenting my findings at the American Society of Criminology in November of this year. Thank you.